Hello everybody, welcome back to our second Motorsport Magazine podcast of 2015. And we've got some entertainment for you today, I can tell you, because for the next hour we have Mark Blundell, a man who must have driven more cars than almost any other racing driver. It's quite extraordinary how many cars this guy has raced or tested. Amazing. Anyway, thank you for joining us at Motorsport Magazine, overlooking the Thames in London. Lovely winter morning. And Mark, thanks for making the trek over here.
It's my privilege. I'm enjoying every minute of it so far, apart from the stairs on the way up.
Yes. Unfortunately, the lift has broken in this building, so good grief.
Along with the ceiling.
Somebody's now about to come through the ceiling. Anyway, we can cope. You were a motocross rider to start with. Have you done any since you stopped doing it, if you see what I mean?
Motocross actually was... I lived in a rural area, so motocross was really the core sport on wheels in sort of farming community as such. Instead of going into go-karts, which most race drivers normally do. So that was what I did as schoolboy level. Top 36 ACU rider at schoolboy level, so reasonably successful. Had an opportunity to go on to be a professional guy, but didn't really like the mud. It was a little bit too messy.
The mud?
Yeah, a little bit too messy at the weekends.
Right.
Wasn't that enthralled about cleaning my bike on a Friday and a Monday, which actually the bonus was I never went to school on a Monday or a Friday. But it transpired that motocross was a great platform for me because, and maybe Simon might understand this a little bit more, but when we did wet races, and I always loved to race in the wet, I would pick lines out that were a little bit obscure, and that came from motocross, because you wouldn't go into a berm or a rut that was there at times because it was too deep. You'd right angle the corner and try and find the maximum grip, and applied in car racing, and that was kind of what put me on that track early on.
I was going to say, must have helped a little bit as well with, just balance, hand to eye, and all of that stuff. An awful lot of that must have translated from your motocross days.
100%. Most people I talk to, when you speak to them about driving a car, they don't understand that actually balance is a key point. We all get back in our road cars when we go home. If you're actually sitting a little bit skew-whiff in your seat and you'd actually feel comfortable, one, you're not confident, and two, you won't operate the car that effectively. So, balance is quite key. And at the same time, I think, that hand-eye coordination, that competitiveness as well. I had no issue with lining up of a grid of race cars. I was used to lining up with 38 other kids next to me, handlebar to handlebar, clutch and brake levers entwined already before we got to turn one. So that, there was no worries about going wheel to wheel. So I think it was a great stepping stone, even though, we had to add another couple of wheels, 2 to 4 wheels, but the transition was quite smooth.
Did you start car racing because you thought it was less muddy or a bit safer, or what?
No, background of all of this is my dad is a panel beater by trade. Right. That's his profession. He was a self-made...
Came in useful, I should think.
Yeah, very, very useful in many, many areas, and there's a lot of stories attached to that as well. Even down to American motorhomes being repaired on the side of the road in the States. But it's another story. But the background is that he was a panel beater and sprayer. That was a profession. He then elevated himself into being what we call a car dealer, and did very well and very independent. So as a young kid, I started driving at 8 years old. I sat on a cushion. I went around the yard of cars. At 14 years old, I was, stealing keys out the key box in the garage and taking cars off the forecourt. I only told him about that 10 years ago. He was yet to find that one out. Some heavy metal as well. If something would have ever happened, I'd have been in big trouble. Not that proud of it now, but it's one of those things you do as a kid. And none of the family had anything to do with car racing, categorically. My dad's dad was a coalman. We come from Islington, and Mum comes from Watford. Dad couldn't read and write, left school at 13. So that's the background of us, which probably makes some sense why I don't have any education either, because I didn't see the sense in it.
Doesn't seem to have done you much harm, though.
Well, I think I look back now and I wished I'd have actually stuck to some things at school, because it would have stood me in good stead. But if I'd have learnt the language, I think there'd have been a benefit to me in F1. If I'd have actually learnt a little bit about adding up, would have been a benefit of my contracts. But there you go.
Am I right in thinking that one of the first cars that you jumped into, where having put the cushion on the seat, you actually wrote off having hit another couple of cars along the way as well?
That's a true story, yeah. The back of the garage, the yard had been freshly tarmacked. I jumped in back in the day, as CV8 Jensen. You remember those? Yeah, quite a powerful car in its day, and got in that, went to drive out the yard, had some fresh tarmac bitumen on the bottom of my shoe, slipped off the brake pedal while I was just manoeuvring a little bit, hit the throttle pedal, got kind of rammed and stuck with it, and launched myself into an old Princess, also a big car. So I wrote the CV8 off, damaged the Princess, also hit a big block of concrete. And those times, there used to be a field next to us, and it was very tall paddock grass. And I can remember to this day running through the field, trying to escape from the wrath of my dad, and trying to actually just go as far as I could before anybody caught me. Luckily, he caught up with me. And to give me due, the words to this day I still think about is, don't worry about it. We can put cars back together, but we can't put people back together. Oh. So I'm angry, but I'm happy that you're okay, and you've learnt a massive lesson, several lessons.
What a great dad.
He's a good guy, and to me that's all important, and that's something that, even the guys that I look after today, one, I make sure they're all insured, and two, just to make sure that, listen, machinery is machinery. Whatever it costs, it is what it is, but life is, you can't put a cost to it.
We should explain before we go any further that you do manage racing drivers, and you manage footballers as well, don't you?
Oh, we manage 22 football players,
wow.
8 racing drivers,
wow.
8 golfers, and then we represent some other people as well. So yeah, it's only a little boutique business with a few people involved, but keeps me out of trouble.
What are racing drivers like compared to footballers and golfers?
You want the true answer?
Yes, of course.
Yes. There's no one listening, don't worry. It's fine.
No, Damien, I think you have to understand, and it's interesting. It's interesting to come out of a sports background and then go into other sports. Football is very much peer pressure, locker room mentality, trying to actually get a young football player to understand that, listen, you don't have to go with the flock all the time. You need to just focus on what you do best, cut your own path. I know you're going to get a bit of heat sometimes, but you'll see that there will be rewards at the end of it. But unfortunately, there's this sort of process that that goes on, and it's difficult to break the mould. And then when you see what goes on in Premier League today, and you see guys on the sort of salaries and what they're up to, it's very difficult to actually get them to understand that there is another channel. I think for what it is, David Beckham for me, I think is a great role model. I think he's a fantastic advert for our country. I think he's a great advert for football. Yeah. Okay, he's no different to me in many ways. I don't have the biggest vocabulary in the world. I'm not that eloquent, but I try and relate in the way that I see. And 9 times out of 10, most black cabs I get into, they all relate to me, so I'm happy with that. I get to go where I want to go. It might not fit everyone, but I think he's a great brand, and he's worked hard at it. And I think that's the kind of guy that a young football player should be looking at. Racing drivers, golfers, very much in tune.
It'd be
very
nice,
similar.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it, Mark, if somebody like Jensen would become a similar figure to Beckham in the world of motor racing, which I think Jensen's well capable of doing.
I think Jensen, I take my hat off to him in the last sort of 6 months. I think he's done a tremendous job in handling this whole thing, what went on with McLaren, and is he, isn't he? Yeah. He did it with class, and I think he got a lot of brownie points for that. And yeah, after sport, in whatever capacity it may be, I think there's a great sporting brand ambassador for the country, because he can cope with that level.
Getting back to Mark Blundell, our man Simon Arron was present the day you first got into a racing car. Is this right, Simon?
The day he first raced.
Oh,
the day he first actually competed. Yeah.
Tell me about it.
This is going back to the old classic triangular Silverstone club circuit, which to my mind, for all they've changed Silverstone, the one thing they've done wrong was replacing the triangular club circuit, because it provided great racing. and I was in the Dunlop Tower looking down on the old Woodcote. We could see cars pretty much from the exit of Beckett's all the way down the straight. And you were in your black Lola, never heard of you previously, you're doing a Formula Libre race, I think. I think Eugene O'Brien was making his Formula Ford debut the same day. And your angle, I mean, we were talking about balance before, but the lines you were taking through Woodcote was sensational because you were flicking the thing sideways half an hour before the corner and holding it sideways all the way through till pretty much cops. It was brilliant to watch.
Yeah, I didn't actually know what I was doing.
Oh, they did well. It looked, yeah, but it looked, you didn't go off. You didn't go off then. I mean, it looked wild, but it looked reasonably effective.
Yeah, no, and again, being honest, it was that mindset of this is a corner. Regardless of what the racing line is, it means nothing to me at this stage because I haven't learnt any trade. Because it really was the first race we ever did, and we were in Formula Ford 1600 up against some old even F1 cars,
well,
5000 cars.
Yeah, it was a Libre race. Yeah, it was all sorts of stuff.
Everything was in. So, and it was wet. Okay, approach the corner. I'm trying to find the driest piece of circuit, and I can see a little bit of a reference where I can turn the car in. If it means I've got to set it up a little bit further back here and then flick it in and drive it out, so be it. It was great fun. Whether or not it was the quickest way, I don't know. But to me, it felt natural. Because if I would have been on a motocross bike, I'd have had the rear end out and, the front end would have been hooked in a berm and off we go. So it was just a natural process. In those races in the early days, I probably learnt, most of my skill sets as a racing driver in that very first sort of 2 years.
The first season you did about 70 odd races, didn't you, or something? You did a huge number.
Again, because of coming from motocross, because we'd go to a motocross weekend, there'd be 4 races in one day. And for us, we were turning up at a Formula Ford event, and it was like, right, 10-lap race, all we need is a couple of extra gallons of fuel, maybe another set of tyres, don't have to be new, they can be worn, one entry fee at 35 quid, whatever it was back then, and let's go and compete. Okay, if we take a corner off and we haven't got the spares, tough. But let's go and get 3 races in on one day as opposed to doing 1. So it made sense. I mean, it was logical. Yes, there was a bit more budget, but pro rata, it was small, and we learnt quickly. So yeah, we did 70 odd races. I think we won
25 apparently.
Yeah, I think, and won more than any other guy, I think, at that time. Again, pro rata because the amount we did, but even so, I think it gave us a huge amount of experience and miles in a short space of time.
I'll cap the self-indulgent stuff after this one, but you go back to 1985, when you were running the National Formula Ford Championship. I mean, looking back at that, the level that season. There was you, there's Bertrand Gachot, Paolo Carcaschi, who was very good and very underrated, Damien Hill, Pete Rogers, late Pete Rogers in his laser, Johnny Herbert in the Quest. I mean, there were 9 or 10 guys, all of very, very similar ability, and you were usually kind of glued together at the front. I mean, the standard of the racing, the quality.
Damon Hill.
Yeah, Damon. Yeah,
Eddie Irvine.
Yeah. I mean, Perry McCarthy was just a little bit behind most of the time. He hate me for saying, but he was. But I mean, the standard that season.
He won't like that,
No, I know he won't. I'll expect it.
You're going to get a phone call soon.
I get phone calls anyway. The standard that season was just brilliant. I mean, it was aggressive and brutal sometimes. I remember 1 or 2 punch-ups between you and Bertie Gachot, for instance. But I mean,
off the track.
Off the track, yeah, off the track. But it's usually because of stuff that happened on the track.
Listen, I still say to this day, the best motor racing I've ever done in my life. The most competitive, the most fun, and I truly believe, that was probably one of the best group of drivers that have come through a transitional junior formula and all gone on to be successful in our model, and that model is to get to Formula 1, because so many of us did make it, and I think they all made it on merit as opposed to checkbook or whatever the case may be. We all kind of slogged through and got there. Some of us then went on to do better than others, but at the end of it all, that little nucleus was quite a talented group.
It was just so exciting, as Simon says, though. The racing was just so thrilling, wasn't it? I mean, you really went, you were quite happy to go and stand on the bank all afternoon in the rain. It was just brilliant stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think also that, the thing on my side of things, what really stuck out was I know for sure there was 2 or 3 events that I blew races just to prove a point. And the point was that I would go into any corner with anybody side by side, and I wouldn't come out of it. So if we didn't make the corner, you know, if I never saw the exit, I made a point, because I knew the next time I raced against a guy, he'd back out, because psychology. And if it didn't work off the track, I normally tried to make it, you know, work in another way. So, so hence why I had points on my license from being. Well, actually, I got arrested one day at Castle Combe.
That was after you tried to poke Bertie through his helmet slot, wasn't it? Trying to poke him in the eye or something, or punch him through.
I did ask him to take his crash helmet off, and he refused.
So he
made an error of judgment because he flipped his visor up, so I managed to get a sort of a semi-fist into the visor slot.
I think that might have been the day. I remember sitting outside race control until about midnight, waiting for the results, because you lot, I mean, about 8 Formula 4 drivers were in with the stewards. I think you and Bertie had been having your punch up, and it was, yeah.
Yeah, no. And it was a classic one of Bertrand not being able to talk any English when he got into the steward's room. You know, and as soon as he come out, it's like...
All right. You went pretty much straight to Formula 3000. How did that occur? I mean, talk about a jump.
Well, I've never done anything in a conventional fashion. And maybe that's because of a lack of understanding and a lack of reference, and not really having anybody with any motorsport knowledge. So we always looked at things without seeing any of the actual barriers that were probably there. Because actually in our first year we ran our own team. Fleet Ray Racing was sort of born, and then we actually then got picked up by Ralph Furman at Van Diemen and went on to race in the works team. And we got 3/4 of the way through, and we thought, actually, this is not even doing what we needed to do, so we put ourselves back in our own team again. And then I picked up a deal with Reynard as a factory driver, so we had all factory support, but we ran it ourselves.
That was in 2 litre and 86.
That was a 2 litre, and we won European Championship, and then I think second in British, and again still having battles with Bertrand, stuff like that. And actually at that stage, we kind of got mucked around a little bit. We got picked up by and offered a deal with Yokohama Tyres to be a supported driver with I think it was called an Anson. Yeah. And that package was presented, and it was a fully funded F3 deal. Gary Anderson was involved in it, and I remember actually going to the meeting with my dad and the big boss of the tyre company at the time, who was going to fund the whole project. He basically made us wait like about 25 minutes. One thing I knew, even as a youngster, my dad doesn't wait for anyone. You know, he will wait, but if you say you're going to be 1 o'clock and you don't come out at 1 and say, sorry, I will be late, you just don't come out, and 25 minutes later, pretty much guarantee we won't be there. And we weren't. So that was that situation. So this had taken us a bit into a different time scale, and we kind of thought, look, you can drive a race car, so it's 4 wheels, it's pedals, it's an engine. Let's just jump. Who says you have to go and do F3? There's no sort of regulation. So we went and bought an old F3000, a year-old car, mechanical injection, plugged up a little bit on the chassis and stuff. We called it the Shed, because it was kind of all bits and pieces on it. And we went with our own team and went F3000 racing.
And led at Spa in the rain.
Led in Spa at the rain, and would have won that one if only if it had been, the result not taken from the lap before when Sala had his accident. And we overtook all the factory guys with the, electronic injection and the mole responses. And we had to borrow some air guns.
Well, I was going to say, the thing I remember about that is when it came to changing from wets to slicks, I think all the other teams had to come and help you change tires because you didn't have enough crew.
That was right, yeah. And that was the beauty of it. There was a lot of, I think, Roger Cowman and Colin Bennett.
Yeah.
They all mucked in and lent us their air guns because all we had was a torque wrench.
Fantastic.
So we came to the pit stop to, change, and it's like, they all rushed in, like, helped us, like, off we went. And we had a great time. So,
that must have been an incredible feeling, actually, leading that race and as a privateer. I mean...
It was. I mean, at the time, I didn't think. All I was thinking about was, one, you couldn't see because it was Spa and there was no vision, so it was reference. Like when Moreno backed off, I kept going. When Wallace backed off, I kept going. And Modena backed off, I kept going. Fortunately, I kept coming out the other end, and that's the kind of way that we drove it. But it it meant a great deal, but not until after, because then we kind of realised that we'd done something with an old package that people were kind of, hang on a minute, and you're on a shoestring budget. You know, we had some funding, but it wasn't big levels. And in fact, actually, I did do F3 because Tom's Toyota asked me to drive their car, and they paid me to drive, and the budget they paid I used to the F3000 budget to extend another couple of races.
In the next issue of the magazine, Simon's written a great story about 3000 because this year's the 30th anniversary of it starting in '85, and you've written a lot about the camaraderie of the series, which we just don't seem to get these days. There's that sort of level where it was very, very competitive, obviously, and very hard, but there was a good element of fun and team spirit sort of within the whole series.
I think some of that stems from where F1 is. You know, you see F1 as an environment now, and even that is not as much fun as it used to be. No one's got time. They haven't got time to even stand in a paddock and have a chat for 5 minutes. You know, so you've got all these mirrored teams, you know, the junior team Lotus and the junior team this, and they all want to try and mimic F1, and it's lost a bit of its I don't say coziness, but there isn't such a warm feeling anymore.
Do you think that's partly to do with the money or not? I mean, how does it compare with football in that sense? That there's more and more and more billions of pounds going into football. Is that?
It's different because, you know, what football's different in that the money is basically the clubs, and you know that's the pool. But at the same time, you know, some of that wealth gets distributed down to the players, and they're on pretty big salaries. But you come back to that kind of locker room mentality. So there is that sort of camaraderie still there to a certain point. Yeah. But when you get into single sports people's focus and they're up against each other, the actual, you know, the getting together afterwards isn't quite the same. No. You know, and the getting together before isn't quite the same. Right. You know, in saying that, back in those early days, the little pack of us were all close, and we still meet every year today. You know, last December we all go out and talk about the same blinking stories as what we do every year. You know, they all get enlarged and bigger and better, but it's it was there. But saying that, it was dog eat dog, so we were all also prepared to take each other out, and that's the way it was. But it was a sort of respectful feeling. Now I think there's a little bit of there's a bit of an edge to it, because if you haven't quite got that association, or if you haven't quite got the budget, or you haven't quite got the right operating team, they already feel that they're one step above. And in doing that, I think they lose a little bit of that crossover.
In 1989, you did some testing for Williams. I mean, this is quite... You've come a long way, haven't you? Quite a short time, actually.
Well, you consider I started in '84 doing Formula Ford, and by '89 I was sitting in the Formula 1 car testing. I mean, even by today's standards, still quite quick. Yeah. And back then it was incredibly quick. Yeah. I had some support from John McDonald, who was you know, former team owner and man about town in F1. John wheeled me into to Frank, and sat there, and basically I sat like a very good little boy, while John told him that I was the best thing since sliced bread, and he would be stupid not to put me in a car to test me. Thankfully, Frank took note and put me in a car, and we went and did some little testing early on, and they were very pleased with the feedback and very pleased with what was going on, and they offered me a 3-year testing contract. You know, and to be at that stage, very young, having a 3-year contract with Williams Grand Prix was a massive thing, and also I was getting paid. You know, which is, when I look back, you know, I was getting paid at Formula 4 2000. I'm quite lucky that I've always been able to sort of cut a deal to try and get some salary, which is fortunate because I'd be no good at anything else. So, but you know, '89 was a pivotal year because, from kind of coming through those winters where there was not much on the horizon, we had a F1 test deal, World Sports Car deal, and an F3000 deal. So I did all those disciplines in one season. But Williams was a fantastic proving ground for me because I had a great rapport with Patrick, you know, good rapport with Frank. I was the youngster, but in many ways, I was the first generation of professional test driver. You know, that was the template for it. And of course, we know who kind of took my role, which, you know, to this day is still one that I think about. I can't regret it because I did it, but you know, things tell me that if I'd have stayed where I was, I probably would have been in a different situation. But that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Sure, it's difficult. Just tell us a bit about. I mean, how did you come to get that wrong, if I could put it that way?
I think because we'd done what we'd done in the old F3000 car. And it really did sort of shake up the paddock a little bit, because, you know, if you're talking about an Onyx with, you know, a £700,000 budget back then from Marlboro and these star guys and, you know, the European guys, and along comes this little tin pan outfit with an old truck and an old car and an old mechanical and injected engine, and blitz by them. Hang on a minute, what's going on? It's not conforming. So,
A bit like Cambridge drawing with Man United.
Exactly that. And, you know, maybe at some stage it was only going to be a blip on the radar, but it showed that there was some potential. And I think they were, you know, Williams were gracious enough to give me the opportunity. And once I got in and, you know, got behind the wheel of the F1 car, I took it and grabbed it with both hands. You know, I think I probably have a good bet with somebody. I think I probably have the most miles of any driver in the world on active ride suspension Formula 1 cars, because I did all of Williams' work later when I did McLaren stuff, and also semi-automatic gearboxes. So again, youngster, learning a huge amount of cutting edge technology stuff with the best in the business.
It must have been quite a shock going from what you call the shed to the Williams Grand Prix car. I mean, you couldn't probably find two more different single-seaters.
Massive differential. I mean, you know, just to have somebody actually like greet you at the door and say, like, you know, like treat you as a professional. I mean, all of a sudden the dynamics change. But in saying that, the dynamics change in such a way where I always wanted to, you know, not try and change myself and still be the guy that I was, because ultimately I think that was some of the draw. You know, and maybe in some ways I think they may have trying to get the next Alan Jones or something, like, you know, the kid out of the outback done good kind of thing, and bring him across. And, you know, I always went in, cost nothing to say hello, and it cost nothing to say good night, even if you'd had a bad day. And I think that went a long way. And wherever I've been, I've tried to sort of take that with me. And I think Williams actually gave me a good grounding for that, because I knew whatever was going on, even in a test role, if something needed doing, and it maybe affected me directly, the guys would actually knuckle down and put an extra hour in to do it, because, you know, we were a tight little nucleus, and they were really good days actually. You know, and, you know, Paddy Lowe was one of my main guys. We'll see where Paddy is today. You know, he sent me a photograph very recently about you know, a test we did at Pembrey with the Williams, and Patrick had turned up for the test with the active car, and I'd whipped around and done an outlap, pulled it straight back in, and threw my hands up in the air and complaining over the radio, really giving it some. And Patrick got his head straight in, like, what's wrong, you know, thumping. And I said, hey, there's a leak, we've got a leak. And he's like, well, what's gone wrong? One of the actuators leaking, this shouldn't be happening. So, and I pulled out this Welsh leak from... He went apoplectic. The guys all fell about laughing, and that was a kind of, you know, we had fun. You know, we got down to work, but we had a lot of fun.
He does tell that story now, though. I think he's got over it. I think. Yeah. Can we just take a couple of questions from our listeners, because they've taken all the trouble to send them in. Rob Asher wants to know, Mark, about your win at Portland in 1997. We're going to jump around a bit here.
Yep.
So, you won by, what was it? I mean, less than a second, but something...
I don't know.
Fag paper, wasn't it?
0.027 pounds of a second.
Yeah, he's got it right. Okay, well done, Rob Asher. Yeah. Did you know you'd won?
No. Again, one of those races of a wet race, dry conditions, and then, again, one of those times for me in a race car, which I used to love. Whenever there was wet conditions and it started to dry out, I was in my element, because it was pushing the boundary every lap and trying to find that little extra bit of dry line. And that's what won us the race at Portland. and we came off the last corner of the last lap. Literally got a bit better traction and out-dragged, the guy in front of us.
Gilles de Ferran.
Yeah, it was Gilles, and I think actually he's now a DJ. He's a Brazilian guy. He's a professional DJ. I think he does better in DJing.
Andre Ribeiro.
No, not Ribeiro.
Let's think. 97.
Good-looking guy. Always affected me. Raoul Bazell.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually a great picture that's been painted by somebody, and it shows Gilles punching the air, winning the race, and me closely behind that, all of about, I don't know, 2 centimetres or something.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't behind, I was in front,
Yeah.
So I won, and then Raoul was further behind. The chances are, possibly, but it wouldn't have been by my doing, because I'd kind of made sure Raoul could have possibly even out-dragged a pair of us, because he was actually making some ground as well. But I would have fought on the next corner about that one.
A win's a win.
A win's a win, and it was a fantastic win. It was great spectacle, and it was fantastic to be part and parcel of that one. But yeah, I didn't really know until firstly I saw the leaderboard in the middle of the circuit and saw our number on top, and then secondly the guys on the radio came over. And it was a little bit of a delayed reaction, actually, because I think they were all celebrating themselves. But they came over and said, like, you've won. And, it was a great feeling.
Yeah. Gareth Holt asks you, what was more rewarding to drive, the late 90s champ cars around, say, Road America, or the mid-90s F1 car around Spa? So it's a pretty tough question,
It's not tough in as much as the most rewarding racing cars to drive are a Formula 1 car, because they're the purest. So for every input there's an output, and I think any driver you speak to, when they drive an F1 car, it's the pinnacle. So from that perspective, F1. But if you asked me what was the best car to race, I would have probably said an Indycar back in that generation. Outside of my Formula 4 days, for me, IndyCar racing in that era was Formula Ford at 200 miles an hour, and 900 horsepower, no traction control. It was proper racing, and wheel to wheel, whether it be on a road course, street course, or an oval, it was serious stuff. And I would say, they were probably some of the best high performance racing days that I ever did.
Great spectacle as well.
Again, I still feel some of the best racing you'll ever see. And enjoyable, because I was lucky enough to win on all the different disciplines. I didn't win a short oval, but I won on a super speedway, road course, street course. And getting an oval right and actually coming through at the end of it after 500 miles is quite a rewarding feeling. And I think a lot of guys actually diss it and dumb it down, but don't dumb it down till you tried it.
No.
A lot of drivers take time to acclimatise from racing on street courses, conventional circuits, to ovals. I mean, how long did it take you, and how easy did you find it?
It took me a while. I tell you why it took me a little bit longer is because I'd sort of gone to Brazil and had a massive accident, and then the first time I'd got onto a super speedway was on my recovery laps from that accident. So, when you roll out after nigh on killing yourself, and you go onto a 2-mile super speedway at Michigan, and you get up to 180, 190, and then you're thinking, like, this is not right. The car is just undrivable because it's not efficient at that speed. It doesn't function properly. So you pull it in, and firstly you're saying, do I really need to do this? Because I've just come back from some big injuries and I don't feel too good about this whole thing. And secondly, I'm screaming to the engineer, like, give me something to drive, He's like, well, what are you talking about? It's like, you're not even going quick. Get over 210, 215, and the car will settle down. And I'm like, okay, this is serious now. I actually got out the car. I left the circuit in the rental car. I went off for an hour, made my decision. Okay, this is what I really want to do. Came back, got back in it, never thought again about it. And that was off. That was where I went.
Wow.
But you loved the ovals, didn't you? I seem to remember reading somewhere that you did actually really enjoy them.
I like the 500-mile races, Ed, because for me, the races were never about the qualifying. It was about getting the car right for that 3 hours and 15 minutes. It was about making sure you had something underneath you that was a usable car throughout the transitional periods. When you have a full tank of fuel and then you've got to jack weight about and you've got to stagger on tyres, there's more to think about. There's a lot more you can start to manipulate with the car to get performance. And when you're getting a toe off of turn 4 coming into 1, and you might get a 15 to 18 mile an hour slingshot, and it's like being in a small aircraft. I can't really explain other than that. If you've ever been in like a little Cessna and you go through turbulence, and that's what it's like in an IndyCar when you're 3 or 4, because you've lost all of that clean air. You're getting shook around pretty much, and also you've got an area of control which actually is completely inefficient because the steering is a void, because it's basically on air. There's a layer of it, and until you can just creep out of that and get some grip back. It's why you see a lot of guys kept to the exit of the corner and they hook and they're off. They're already on a blanket of air. It's not because they got it wrong, it's just there's no air for them to be efficient. So it's a strange feeling, and one that you have to really get some experience. Don't get me wrong, I went on an oval and I got told off straight away by some of the big boys. They came down the pit lane and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "What do you think I'm doing?" "I'm driving the car." He said, No. This is not F1. Don't come by me and like chop me off and go into the corner." I said, "Well, that's what I do all the time." He said, Yeah. That's great. He said, "But you're going to stick me in the wall. Don't worry about yourself. Worry about me. Because you're taking all my air. And you just took my front end off me, and I've washed out and I'm nearly up in the grey and I'm off." It's like Michael Andretti, Hunza Jr. I'm like, "Yeah, screw you." Okay, so they do it to you. Then it's like, okay, I got you. Yeah? But you have to learn all of this, and it's something that you have to be respectful of, and it's when you get that level of respect, you can then run 3-4 laps in the super speedway an inch and a half away from the guy at 225, because that's the level of confidence and respect you have.
It's fascinating. I mean, is there an element of fear involved, Mark? I mean, this is, you're going very, very quickly in a car, aren't you? There.
Yeah, I mean, that's the quickest I've ever been in a racing car. Outside of Le Mans, that hand grenade we drove with Nissan. IndyCar and a super speedway, those days we were doing 2:48 on the straight and 2:27 in the corner. 29.8 seconds for 2 miles average. 25 other guys around you. It's a busy environment. And I think you have to take on board that when things do go wrong, they're going to go wrong in a big way. There's no coming back from that. And there's an element of fear, but that's the element that drives you. I think if you... I'm reading all the stuff today about 1,000 horsepower, and I think all the guys would be up for that because they want something to actually challenge them. I want to drive a car that I've got to get in control of. It's me, machine, circuit. Let me apply my skill sets to actually do the job. And if it bites me back, I've got to tame it. That's my skill. That's what I do. So give me something. Don't give me something that does it all for me. I'll do that in my road car every day. It's boring. That's not a racing driver. That's just it's a plug and play.
It's also not just you either. It's us watching. The people who pay to come through the gate, they want a spectacle that's going to give them some kind of thrill up the spine as well.
Yeah, definitely. That starts with the noise of the cars. Who wants to go to a pop concert and watch the singer whisper? You got to give something to get all the stimulants going, and that means I see something revving at 19,000 revs, screaming and giving me some fantastic sound, and at the same time it's going sideways because the guy's lost control of it. Fantastic. That's what I want to watch. Yeah. And if he's side by side with another guy and they get sideways together and one gets it wrong and they clip each other and they're off, brilliant.
Racing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line, and that's where I think it's gone slightly out of kilter, and that's where I think everyone says, "Oh, the US." The US has got some great racing. They might fabricate now and again with what they do to pack it all up, but they give a show. And, Premier League football's successful because if you watch a 90-minute match, I watched one, 2 nights ago. I didn't support the teams, but it was a brilliant 90 minutes of entertainment.
It is.
That's what I want to watch.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
Simon Arron was talking earlier on about the I'm not sure if he said the Brit Pack or the Brat Pack, but anyway, both phrases apply.
Actually, it's the Rat Pack.
The Rat Pack. Okay, the Rat Pack. Okay, because I'm asking because Chris B, I don't know what B is, but Chris B wants to know who didn't you enjoy racing against?
Bertrand Gachot.
Yeah. There's a number of drivers over the years that you don't enjoy racing with, and I tell you the fact of the matter is most of those guys that you don't have a great enjoyment with on circuit are because you're not confident of what they're up to. And because, no matter, we just talk about fear and an element of that, there's also self-preservation built into most drivers. They're not stupid. So if I'm rattling into a corner, even though I'd be the first one to say that I'll go in the corner and I won't back out, there's still a calculation attached to it. Even, I drive every day and I drive with a get out of jail card in my pocket because I'm always understanding what the exit is. If something goes wrong, where am I going to go? And I do that on a race circuit to the best of my ability. But when people drive and don't actually have that capacity, and British GT was a very big thing for me. I went and did a bit of racing with a friend of mine just for some fun, and the reason why I stopped is because of the other guys on circuit. And not to disrespect that they couldn't drive, it was the capacity that was available to understand what else was going on around them. And at that stage I was thinking, this is going to affect me in such a way where I don't really need to do it. I'm used to driving with guys who understand where we all are, and if I do this, they know they've got to do that. If they do that, I know I've got to do this. But when there's a level of experience that doesn't actually add up to that, the danger level goes up.
Are we naming names apart from Mr. Gachot or not?
I'm not really going to be... no, I don't think so. Put it this way, all the guys that I didn't get on with know it.
Fine, yes, I'm sure they do. Yes, I'm sure they do. Okay, let's jump to Le Mans, because Neil Briscoe says, how many times, Mark, were you on opposite lock on that Le Mans pole lap in that Nissan? Was it the hairiest car you've ever driven?
It was the hairiest lap I've ever driven. And we, and I think the story's been told quite a lot of times now, but purely because the shortened story is we never ran that car for one clean lap up until the lap that I got on the throttle coming out the last corner on a set of hard race tyres, because we didn't put anything else on. We never knew what the car would do, whether the tyres would last. And I gave it everything coming off that last corner, opposite lock, straight away, spinning the wheels in fourth gear, up the straight, before I got to the Dunlop. And at that stage, it's like, right, you just got to hang on. And a Dunlop chicane, I think I was crossed up throughout that. And Tertre Rouge crossed up. 238 miles an hour for the first chicane. Got there, no reference to braking. So everything was just reactive references, trying to understand what I felt was underneath me, but not knowing. And to this day, I still say, if we had a proper set of tyres and I had some experience, I think there's another 4 seconds in it. Round Le Mans, I think there really is. Because, the level of grip that we threw away with a set of race tyres, the hardest tyres we had, just to actually do the ultimate qualifying lap and know what was underneath you, there was a bag full of time there.
Can you give us a feeling of what that power felt like? Was it almost sort of out of control in some way?
It was, because it was out of control in the fact that the delivery of it was so abrupt. It really was the switch. It was like you're either on or you're off. And then when it kicked in, the only way it kicked in was going sideways, so that was a counteract, even changing gear. Every change, counteract. That it was only a 5-speed box, and in 4 gears it was spinning rear wheels. So it was like that, but it wasn't. It was not that lap where any of that came into consideration. All that came into consideration was, let's just get this thing to the line, knowing actually that I was probably going to be in a whole bunch of trouble when I got back anyway, because I'd taken the radio out and disregarded any, they told me to pull it in because it was over boosting again. That was the big problem with it. And they'd already radioed at the beginning of the lap to say, like, bring it in. I'm just like, I've been here a week already. I'm not coming in. So and that was the crux of it. But the ironic thing for that was, myself, Julian Bailey were teammates. We knew we had a qualifying car. We'd been bantering all week about who was going to do the quali runs. So we said, look, we'll decide it on the flip of a coin. Heads, you quali, and if I win, then you take the choice and start in the race. So one of us would have the benefit of starting or going for a pole lap. So I won the toss and said, no, I want the quali car, I'm going to go for it. Anyway, we got on pole. Julian started the race, And Murray Walker kept saying, and Mark Blundell leads the race. So he never got any recognition whatsoever. So
it could have been worse. He could have said Martin Brundle.
There you go, yeah. I've used his name in vain a few times.
But that did turn into the Le Mans 24 minutes, more or less, though, didn't it?
It did, yeah. Because at that stage we were the first team to use carbon fibre brakes for Le Mans. They weren't very effective. So they ran into the back of a Jaguar, and it was early stages that were very disheartening in many ways because we felt we had something underneath us to get a result. But that's Le Mans, Simon, as you know. It's one of those events that every driver who does it, I think, cherishes, especially if you get to a point where you can win it, because there's so much effort put in, and not just by you, by your teammates, by your team, by the logistics, by everybody. And it's a 6-7 month program.
Is your Le Mans win if you have a trophy cabinet in your house, which is the one that gives you the best buzz?
Well, firstly, I can tell you that there is no trophies in my house. So
you sold them all?
No, I don't think it'd be worth much. But if you walk in the door of my house, you would never know I've been a racing driver. And that's conscious from, you need to understand that as a kid, at 21 years old, I was already a father. So I was a young dad trying to cut a career in international motorsports. There's a lot of responsibility. So I always came in knowing that I've done my day's work there. Now I've got to change a dirty nappy. It's back to reality. Yeah. And I never really had anything of a reminder around the house to sort of get me out of tune with what the deal was all about, and the deal for me was, how am I going to make a career to make sure that I look after my son? That was what drove me to. So even to this day, you wouldn't know. There's stuff about my kids, but you wouldn't really say that there's anything that tells you that I was in racing for 25 plus years. Go to my office, my man cave, that's different. Yeah. Le Mans trophies is there.
I think I'd come out with less money. I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to bother, thanks.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Le Mans would be one of the highlights of my career. Yeah, sure. And the reason why I say that is also because the way in which it was done, because I was actually doing the testing role at McLaren for Senna and Berger, and I got the opportunity to go and do Le Mans with Jean Todt at Peugeot, with Derek Warwick. And it was the only race I did that year. So, of course, 1 out of 1 is quite nice, and it's quite a nice one to do. But it was a great program, and and to this day, it's got some relationships that are everlasting from that victory.
Must have been quite interesting for you, Simon, really, going back to that day, the first time you saw him, and then to see Formula One winning Le Mans and all of that. I mean, a lot of those guys really did brilliantly, didn't they?
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I mean, I've been very privileged that I've worked with a lot of guys over the years, like Mark. I mean, like Damien Hill. I was at Damien Hill's first race when he was completely out of his depth in Formula 4 2000 at the end of '83, and he didn't look like he'd do another race, let alone go on to become world champion. I've been very, very lucky, and it's been fascinating. It's been a fascinating journey, absolutely fascinating.
But one of the reasons I wanted to ask that is because there seems to be a lack now of. I mean, I think I'm right in saying there aren't any Italians in Formula One, are there? No, there aren't. Right, good. And you used to get, a lot of French coming up, Brits coming there. But there seemed to be this, almost like the football academy. Okay, we're going to get these kids, and one day they're going to play for Real Madrid. Seems to have just fallen away, doesn't it?
I think that's economics. Because
but you didn't have economics. You didn't have much money.
No, but I think also back then, as I say, there's a crop of guys that were fortunate that one way or another they kind of cut a pathway and grabbed at every opportunity. And fortunately as well, there were teams around that were going to take a punt, and there were teams around that, they may have said they had some money, and in reality they didn't. Like I sat at Brabham with bounced checks on 2 occasions because they told me they had money, they didn't. But it didn't matter at the time. It was all part of the process. But there was enough money around to give a guy a go. And those days just seem to have gone. It's not there anymore. And that's some of the problem you're seeing now with F1 diminishing in terms of cars on the grid. Where do we get the next generation to come in? Because if they don't come in with $20 million, they're not coming in at all.
But it's simple maths in a way. Because back when you made your decision to go to Brabham in 91, I mean, there were, I don't know, 35, 36 F1 cars. I mean, there were 30 plus. And there was space to accommodate a few graduates from F3000 or F3 or whatever. Now you've got, we look as we stand, 18 Formula One cars, and then the pyramid below, we've got far more feeder series than we had before. You know, you've got full grids in GP2, GP3, FIA, F3 is oversubscribed, World Series by Renault. There are far more people at the kind of level where you would be ready to step into Formula One, and there are far fewer seats to accommodate them.
And hence you're getting healthier grids in WEC with talented drivers.
Absolutely. No,
you're
absolutely.
getting, you know, for me, if you look at a DTM grid, I think there's some immense talent on the DTM grid. And I think that's F1's loss, because I think there's some guys there that deserve to be in a Formula One car.
Well, one of your guys, Roberto Meri,
Yep.
who was FIA European F3 champ in 2011. I mean, everything he's done points to a real natural gift. And yet there's nothing wrong with going off and earning a career in the DTM as he did for a year or two. But, you know, people like him, apart from a few laps in a Caterham, have had a chance to do very little.
But then you look at those few laps he did in the Caterham, he didn't test it, he just jumped in it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He outperformed the guy who was a regular driver in it. And so that gives you an understanding of his ability. And you're right, that's the kind of talent that sits there that's not being utilised. And I think that's a loss to us, because I want to go and watch the best of the best.
I mean, the one that gets me at the moment, who's not part of your stable, is Robin Frins, the Dutch kid who won Formula Renault, Formula BMW, he won races in GP2 when he came in, and not with big money either, just, you know, talent.
Yep.
And he's now blind alley, nowhere to go.
Which are the 8 drivers you're looking after? Just so we know, so our readers
Well,
know.
the main guys who we look after, Gary Paffett.
Right.
And Gary have managed for 11 years now.
Right.
Mike Conway,
Yeah.
coming up to manage Mike for 10 years. And Tom Blomqvist, who now is 3 years under the wing. So for me, stepping away from the cockpit of a race car, I'm extremely proud now, because I've managed those guys and they're all now in factory seats. So they've all got manufacturer deals. And that is, you know, that's just, right, they've done their job and I've been able to do my job.
That's good.
And it's sort of a really rewarding feeling. So I now get more reward out of seeing those guys in those seats than what I did banging around in a British GT race or anything like that.
That's interesting, because there's a question here from Karen. And she says, do you enjoy the management side of things as much as you enjoyed your racing? Or is it just, well...
It's different, obviously.
Competitive, though, still.
You see, I've always had something going on in the background, because I always treated motorsport as being quite fickle. So there was always some little commercial business that I wanted to have as a bit of security. So when things didn't go according to plan, for whatever the reasons were, and the motorsport side started to dry up, and then we went and got the opportunity to do TV for several years, you know, and that's something I had to make a call on, because if I didn't do it, somebody else would. It was good while it lasted, and it was another chapter in the book, so to speak. But you know, the management side is something obviously what started with myself and Martin Brundle, 2MB, very cheesy name, but it was effective at the time. And you know, that was also based off of the pair of us being at the BRDC, because we were seeing money getting put into young kids, and we were looking at it and saying, look, it's not really structured, it's not being looked after, and it's not benefiting the kids in the way they should get some benefit with this amount of money. So we said, right, let's start a management company. And I'm now, you know, Martin's no longer with me. I bought Martin out, and we're still best of buds, but you know, his focus is on the TV more than anything else. And I've now gone on another step, because I've now got some other guys with me. Theo Pafitis is my chairman, an investor.
Is he really? The Dragon Den.
Yeah, Dragon's Den, yeah. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through the interview process. He left me with some underwear on, put it that way. And you know, another guy, Ian Childs, who's chairman of Red Letter Days, you know, the big experience day company. So they're with me in the business now, and it's a new chapter, because you know, I'm now learning about business in a different way and at a different level to what I've ever been before. And it's given me some bandwidth to go and start building something that is rewarding. Yeah, I do enjoy it. I like to go and negotiate with a team owner, and you know, this is my guy. I'm 100% behind him. You know, you come to me and you tell me that he's got some negatives, well, I'm going to come to you and say, well, here's all the positives, and this is how we're going to fix the negatives.
Right.
And by the way, you need to pay him X because you're going to do your bloody good job. Yeah. And it might take some time to convince them, but over time, you know, Tom Blomqvist and BMW is not a deal that happened like that. That's a deal that was nurtured from June of last year.
Sure.
You know, head of BMW Motorsport used to be my mechanic at McLaren on the engine program.
Really?
I've known Jens for a long time. So it's a case of, hey Jens, can you keep an eye on Tom? I'm not saying that there's anything there yet, but just please watch the progress. And oh yeah, by the way, he can beat Verstappen, he can beat Ocon. He's that good. Yeah? Just give him a run. Once you run him, I'm going to guarantee that you'll like what you see. That's what I do now.
Does it slightly irritate you in any way that Red Bull appear to be supplying so many of the drivers who make it? I mean, because you could never compete with that kind of clout, can you? No.
No way in the world compete with that.
No.
But that's a different process. That's look at
Well,
somebody.
you mentioned, you know, two drivers there who've come into. Oh, actually, Ocon hasn't, as he's
Ocon's Lotus. He's a Lotus
test
junior.
driver there, isn't he? He's a race driver.
He won the FIA F3 championship.
I know he did.
Yeah.
I know he did.
He's a Lotus junior. Lotus junior.
Yeah.
I don't think he's got an actual drive at the moment.
No, he hasn't. No, as we speak, no, he hasn't.
he
Another.
hasn't.
You can't compete with Red Bull.
No.
Nor would I want to,
Right.
because you know that for me isn't management.
Yeah.
You know, management is about enhancing, nurturing,
Yeah.
guiding.
Yeah.
You know, Gary came to me and Martin at the time, in the early years, in a bit of a mess, and we've stuck with him and we've helped him out. And I think if you spoke to Gary today, Gary would be the first to tell you that, you know, we got him out of a hole, and at the same time, we've helped him over those years to try and maximise and give him the benefit of our experience and mine now in the latter years, and big years as it is now, but in trying to, you know, get him the best deal possible. And it doesn't mean that that's always about helping him on track. There's a lot of stuff we can help with off track.
Sure.
We've all lived it. I still think like a racing driver, but I think like a racing driver for the benefit of all the guys I look after. At the same time, I think like a businessman, because I'm also thinking for the benefit of them.
Yeah.
And yes, along the journey, I'm not doing it for nothing. I admit that.
Sure.
I'm doing it because I want to.
Yeah.
It's rewarding.
Best reason for doing something, isn't it?
Exactly.
We're going to have to stop, which is a real shame, because as I said at the beginning, you've just driven so many cars. I mean, you cannot cover Mark Blundell's racing career in 1 hour. You cannot do it.
Does that mean it's part two?
I think there should be. If you go, there should be
for the same money.
Which would be nothing then, wouldn't it?
Thank you. Would you like to manage me? No, you wouldn't. It's too late. It's too late. Can I just ask you one more thing before we go? And that was it's about testing with McLaren. I mean, Senna and Berger. Apart from, I imagine there were a lot of laughs where Gerhardt's concerned, anyway. But what did you learn from all of that? And did you, in Senna's case, was there something, you know, that you could obviously see where you thought, I may be quick, but...
It's interesting. You know, obviously I made a decision in '91 to go run with Brabham, which was probably, in hindsight, the worst decision I ever made, because I should have stayed with Williams and I should have stuck. But I had nobody around me to tell me any different. Even worse was, you know, Williams were going to run me in the third Grand Prix, or the third British Grand Prix and such. We were going to have a Grand Prix at Donington, do you remember?
Yeah.
It was muted that we were going to run a third car.
Yeah.
And it was going to... So I was already online to do that. Everything was programmed. I was going to be in that car. And it never happened. So a few things went against, and then I made a bad call. Also made a bad call the day that I went out pit lane in Brabham, because I understood very quickly that it was not going to get me where I needed to be. I understood even more when I got invited back by Williams to test for them, which is unheard of and still doesn't happen to this day. Contracted one team and asked to go back and do testing for them. When you go around 2.2 seconds quicker on the same circuit on race tyres than what you did in the Brabham on qualifying tyres, you know you've made a mistake. So when Ron Dennis came knocking at the end of that year to say, I want you to be official test and reserve for Senna and Berger, I said, yeah, that's the right thing for me to do, because I need to regroup and I need to go learn some more. Did I learn from Senna? Yes. Did I have to be assessed by Senna? Yes. Even from the first day at Silverstone, he turned up at 11 a.m. in the morning, put headphones on, listened to my feedback, went and looked at data, basically talked with the engineers, clarified that what I was talking about was correct, and then left. And it was kind of like a seal of approval. You know, the great ones come in and he said that he's okay and he's off. Yeah. And back then it was important because, you know, we used to run 2 cars for 1 driver on a test, and we'd be testing fuel. You know, different fuels, because back then it was also, you know, soluble stuff and, you know, high performers. We'd have half a second a lap in different fuel. Testing floors, you know, car would have different floor on. So what we did then immediately was going on the car for the Grand Prix that following weekend, because it get turned around, shipped out and on the car. Sure. So you had to have some confidence. What else I learned? I learned that I was never hard enough as a Grand Prix driver. I was never selfish enough. And to this day, that's still something that in many ways I try and install in the guys I look after, but not to the point that you're...
Difficult balance.
Yeah, not to the point that you're not a nice person with it, but that you have enough inner belief and confidence that this is the right thing to do and stand your ground.
Sure.
And, you know, it's always a difficult balance to achieve, but that's something that Senna taught me. And psychology, because that was probably the master of psychology. You know, when I did Imola test in an active car and matched his lap time in his passive car, and we all sat and debrief, and he poured over the data, and, you know, passive car should have still been quicker. There was no way the active at this point should have been quicker. And it got to the stage where the physio needed to take me back to the airport because they were staying on for an extra day and I wasn't. I was going back. And, you know, I said, okay, we need to go to the airport now. And, you know, everyone was in the debrief. And Senna picks his head up and goes like, nope, he stays here. He stays with us. And like, okay, that's being told to get back in your box. Wow. Yeah, that's the power I've got. So I'm about to use it. Wow. And just put you back in your place. And that's the kind of, you know, the kind of influence he had, and that's what he built around him. Yeah. And I think that's the difference. That's what makes the greats for me. You know, I look at the guys that, you know, do I say that I could have won a Grand Prix with the right equipment? I know I could. Right. Because I've driven Grand Prix winning equipment. I know what I could have done in it, and I know I can race with the best. Yeah. Do I say I could have been a world champion? I would question myself, because I'm not sure I could have built the right team around me. And I only say that in that I saw some greats build those teams. And, you know, I know I look back at a Schumacher. I still, to this day, you know, hand on heart, I would still say he was not the best racing driver come Sunday afternoon. You know, if I had to put somebody on the back of the grid go to the front, I'd put Senna in front of him, because that for me was the ultimate. But I would also say that he's probably one of the most complete drivers, because he put a team of people around him that delivered him 7 world titles. You know, he was a massive influence, but look around at the structure that he created. That took some doing. And that's the guys who make the difference.
And they were kind of like-minded little crew as well, weren't they? They were all pretty tough, pretty no compromises.
I mean, you know, those are the things that you try and instill in the young guys now, is like build those relationships to a point where you're so intricate that it can't function without you. You know, because that's the pull that you've got, and that's what I saw when Senna was there. You know, Gerhard was a fantastic driver. He was an incredibly fast driver. But there was a difference between Gerhard and Senna in the way they operated. You know, and you could see that, and that difference was noticeable come the end of a World Championship winning year.
Did it almost feel like you were working for Senna rather than Ron Dennis? So it sounds like what you're saying.
I think to a certain point that would be true. I think that would be true, and not to say that I hadn't had a little bit of that effect when I was at Williams as a youngster, but at the same time, I think you know, for a guy to roll up in the garage and actually listen in and give his like assessment and say, okay, he's okay, carry on. kind of makes you feel like, okay, well, really, I don't need to talk to anybody else about my deal. I might as well go and speak to Arron. Yeah. But that was the power of the man. You know, he had a huge amount of presence and character, and he was charismatic and passionate. And you know, when he needed to say something, he didn't necessarily have to say it. Yeah, people knew.
It's a tremendous yardstick for you though as well. I mean, yeah, if you're going to do laps, that he paid. I mean, that's a tremendous.
Hey, so you know, you never stop learning.
Sure.
To this day, you know, we all learn about things, but there's just certain little areas. And you know, I sat with him on a plane on a trip we were doing, and he pulled out an A4 book, and it was full of press cuttings, and all the press cuttings had highlighters on certain pages, and I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I'm reviewing all of the press, and all of the points that I'm looking at are negative comments that refer to me. Because when I speak to the journalist, I will understand what's already been written about me, and then I will choose what I will say after.
Wow.
So that's how his mind worked. Because you would have interviewed him.
Oh, many times.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was just about to say, I mean, I remember the first F3 race, and this is still F3, remember, 1983. David Leslie qualified the Magnum on pole against the odds, and then Ayrton disappeared and won the race by a fortnight. But the illustration in Motoring News that week was of Ayrton spinning during practice, and he went absolutely ballistic because you know, he's got this, you know, he started off his he'd won the Trucks and TV race, but he started his British F3 Championship season with a great victory, and Motoring News happens to have got a picture of him spinning, which is the only interesting picture of him, because the rest of the time it was just a car sitting on its own out front. It wasn't, you know, and he went absolutely mad.
Yeah.
Because perception meant so much to him. Because it was that's what he wanted to. The outside world needed to perceive that it was this, and he was very
fascinating.
Yeah. But
okay.
you know, the good things is all the photographs of my F1 podiums are all world champions, so that's the only thing I do have on my wall.
Positivity is everything, and
it's perception.
Perception. Okay, good. I wasn't going to mention, but I am going to, that we did have a question from Tom Blomqvist, who is managed by Mark Blundell, and Tom says, "Ask Mark Blundell what makes Tom Blomqvist so special." Now I reckon that shows a bit of attitude, doesn't it? You don't have to answer it.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to answer it.
No,
but
good.
I'm seeing him this afternoon, actually. Yeah? So I'll tell him 1-to-1.
Okay, hello and bye-bye, Tom.
Just one last little detail. True or apocryphal that you and Martin Brundle actually had to share a bed at the French Grand Prix one year?
That's true. That is true.
Well, you did say you were buddies. I was just
no, that is true. And yeah, that is a true story, because actually the hotel that we got booked into by the team was quite possibly the worst hotel room. It wasn't a hotel room. It was like a barn with a hole in the roof and a chicken in the corner. Yeah, it was that bad. It was before the French Grand Prix.
Chicken, did you say?
A chicken, a live chicken in the corner of the room. It was like an open barn with just a bed in it. You know, this is Formula One at its best.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, myself and Marty were like, "There's no way we're staying there. You know, it's just not possible." And we got in a car and we started to drive around to try and find somewhere else to stay. And Wildeprat, the guy who used to be at the...
Jean Wildeprat, yeah.
We managed to bump into him, and I think he had a room at Benetton that was spare. And he loaned us this one room, and it only had one double bed. So the night before the Grand Prix, or the qualifying, myself and Marty shared a bed together. But rest assured, we put pillars in between us.
On that note, we will close this family show. Anyway, thank you, Mark Blundell. Thank you very much. It's highly entertaining. Hour and a quarter. Fantastic. Come back part 2 when you got time. Brilliant.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you very much, everybody. Thank you to Simon Arron, to Ed Foster, to Damien Smith, of course, our editor, and to Alan, who records all this for us. Thank you very much for joining us. We need you. You need us. It's all good. See you next time.